Coming from Seattle, US, original from Peru, he's an engineering manager at Pinterest, known for his focus on developer productivity. Formerly an Android engineer, he's excited to connect with the iOS community. Let's welcome Manuel Nakamurakare.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Manuel. As she said, I am an manager at Pinterest. I am managing the mobile team, and today I want to talk to you about how Pinterest keeps track of the state of the builds. But before I get started, I want to talk a little bit about my employer, Pinterest. Our mission is to bring everyone the inspiration to create a life they love. We also like to think ourselves as the last positive corner of the internet. We have 460 million monthly active users, and we are actively hiring. We are still have a very flexible remote policy. So if you're interested, please apply. We have offices, engineering offices in Mexico City, in the US, Seattle, San Francisco, New York, in Toronto, and also in Poland. Before I get started, I want to provide some context about my talk. But let's get to this picture. Does anybody know where this is? Mount Fitzroy, right? Yeah, so you see, this is a very beautiful picture. It's a very clear day. But that's not the case every time that you go here. When I went to the visitor center to visit Mount Fitzroy, they told me, yeah, if you see Mount Fitzroy in a clear day, you are very lucky. You only get to see it about 10% of the time. So they told me, oh yeah, go check this website called WindGuru so that you can check the weather. So I went to that website as they told me. And this is what I got, right? Very easy to read: wind speed, knots, wind gust, knots, wind direction, temperature, isotherm, cloud cover. I mean, it's very straightforward, right? Very easy to understand. I know what knots are. I know what's a high cloud. I mean, everybody knows, right? Very simple. Of course not, right? This is very complicated. It's very hard to understand. It's a lot of metrics. You just understand the letters, but you don't understand the meaning. And that's exactly how I felt. Now, does anybody want to guess if I was able to see Mount Fitzroy or not? Well, this is a picture of me. You are not able to see, but this is me. And that's supposed to be Mount Fitzroy. I mean, it's not visible at all. The lake was frozen. But I was still kind of happy to be there. But I mean, how is this even related to builds, right? Like, it's very random. Well, at Pinterest, we started investing very heavily on builds a few years ago. And once you start to focus on an area, you start collecting metrics, right? Otherwise, how do you know you're doing well or not? And we started doing that. We started collecting local build times. Then we started looking at local build times P50, local build times P95, CI pre-commit build times P50, CI pre-commit build times P95, CI post-commit success rate, CI integration test pass rate. Again, what does this even mean, right? You're probably wondering. I mean, at first, I also didn't know, right? I started Pinterest. I didn't even know that people look at these things. And that's exactly, just like I look at WindGuru, that's exactly how some people feel at Pinterest, right? Every time that we need to tell upper management, hey, we need to keep investing in build times. If we give all of these metrics, they don't understand what we are talking about. That's why we came up with this concept of a build score. It's just a single score that is a little bit more easy to understand how things are going. So it's a very good way for upper management to tell, hey, is this going well? Does this need more investment? And so on. Now, I want to also give you a little more context about why at Pinterest we care about builds. This is the scale of Pinterest. We have approximately 1 million lines of code, approximately 100 contributors, depending on how you count them, 10,000 of builds per month, and thousands of commits per month. So why should you care about builds? In the case of Pinterest, because of the scale, we've estimated that, for example, every time that we are able to improve the build times by 30 seconds, that's similar to getting one developer back in productivity. And that's a lot. Similarly, just to give an example, some of our worst build times are about 6 to 7 minutes. So that's 6 to 7 minutes that developer needs to wait for the compilation process to be done. So those are 6 to 7 minutes that people might get distracted with something else. Maybe they go to, I don't know, to Facebook to watch a small video, or they might switch to another task. That's also expensive, right? Any time that you switch context to another task is time that you have to then take back, right? Once you come back to your original task, you just don't automatically go to it, right? I mean, everybody has heard of the term engineers are in that zone, right? So it takes time to get into that zone again, and that's, again, time wasted in context switching. But there are also other things that are maybe less measurable. Similarly to context switching, right? Every time that you're context switching, you might start getting have some feelings of cognitive fatigue, which can ultimately lead to burnout. And that's really bad, right? Once engineers are in that state, they might feel not very motivated to work. They might ask for some time break, and that's also not good. So why is a build score important? First one is it's a way to measure the build developer experience, right? This is, as I said before, it's a way for upper management to tell if things are going well, if it needs more investment or not. As originally, when you have too many metrics, it's very complicated to understand. So this is basically how some people might perceive it, right? If you don't understand it, then it doesn't matter. And third, similarly to the other 2 points, by knowing what areas are not very healthy in the developer workflow, right? In the developer workflow, you have different things, say, PR review times, you have to wait for the deployment, you have to wait for the builds. So if you know what's the area that is not healthy, then you know how to prioritize your investments. What are some ways to measure the state of the builds? I'm not sure if people are familiar, but there are some of these frameworks. One is called DORA. It allows to measure the deployment frequency, how frequently you deploy to production. There is the change failure rate, how often you might find bugs in production. And then there's also time to restore. I mean, it has many metrics. There's also the SPACE framework. Similarly to DORA, it also has some performance metrics, but in addition, they also try to measure other things that are maybe less quantifiable, like the well-being on the team, communication, collaboration, etc. At Pinterest, we decided not to go with them. One of the big reasons was that these frameworks, DORA and SPACE, they are too high level for what we are looking for, right? We knew that people were complaining about their build times. Some people were even saying, oh, this is terrible, like I want to switch platforms. So that was not acceptable. So we had to focus on this. And that's why we started focusing on the build developer experience, which basically has 2 components, local builds and CI builds. And this is how it looks like. Very simple, right? As opposed to what I show first. So iOS 17%, 70% C. That gives you a better idea of how things are going. And we use this letter system to provide a more familiar system, right? If you see that it's 70%, then from here you can see what it means. C, 70% to 79, so it needs some work. In case the score is less than 59, say for example 50%, you would get a letter F. That's unacceptable. So that's when my team, right, that team responsible for builds, is probably going to drop everything and instead focus on making the build healthier again so that developers can become productive again. And how is this calculated? What kind of information do we use? So I mentioned before, right, we use local and CI build time. In the case of local build time, we use a metric which is calculated by counting the number of builds that happen that last more than 10 minutes. So 10 minutes is a number that we just came up with. It's very arbitrary. Basically, we said any time that builds are more than 10 minutes is a really bad experience. So we wanna get a sense of how many of those are happening. In the case of CI build time, we had some options. We have some pipelines that run on pre-commit. Just to provide some context about what this means, pre-commit pipelines are those pipelines that run every time that you push and you commit on your PR, but you haven't landed on the main branch yet. And then there's also the other pipelines that are called CI, post-commit pipeline, which run once you have merged your changes into the main branch. So in this case, right, a developer usually will care more about how fast is a pre-commit pipeline, given that that's what is in between their changes and being able to merge into the main branch. And that's why we chose to measure that pipeline. There's also CI uptime. CI uptime basically tries to give information about how healthy is your CI system. So in this case, right, it's not very practical to use the pre-commit pipeline because the pre-commit pipeline might fail because there are real issues, right? Like if maybe your code change does something that doesn't allow the app to compile, that's not really a system issue, that's a code issue. And we don't want to include that. We just want to know if the system is healthy or not. Because of this, we decided to use the post-commit pipeline, which is the pipeline that runs after your changes have been landed into the main branch. And once we have all of this information, right, we just multiply all of them and come up with a number. So percentage of local builds below a threshold. For CI, similarly, we take the percentage of CI build times below a threshold. For local builds, the threshold that we chose is 10 minutes. For CI is 45 minutes. It could be something else for you. And then we use the CI uptime. Some tips that I want to share also from having done this. We've basically been working with the score all of this year. We came up with this idea late last year. So one thing that I would say is try to use existing metrics, right? Because measuring things doesn't really add value, right? If you invest, say, 2 months coming up with the metrics, that's not really going to improve the developer experience. That allows you to have a better picture of what's the issue. So try to use existing metrics if possible. Iteration, right? Because nothing is perfect. When we started calculating the build score, at first we were using the post-commit build time. And then we realized, right, that that's really not a number that developers care too much about, but instead we care about the pre-commit build time. And then remember the objective, right? Remember, we are trying to measure what's the state of the build from the developer's point of view. So if you are able to get more metrics that can inform this, that's useful. But try not to make it too complicated. Try not to mix it up with other things. Then I also want to share some challenges that we ran into. because when we initially started working in this score, we focused only on mobile platforms, right? iOS and Android. But then we also other platforms started being interested in this concept. So we started onboarding the web app. But things are a little bit different, right? For the web app, anytime that they land into the main branch, also they release to production. So things are a bit different. In the case of mobile, when you land into the main branch, you don't land into production, right? Instead, we just do like weekly releases. Normalized metrics, yeah, because this is because some responsibilities may be part of different teams. So sometimes teams might have different kind of metrics. For example, in my team, we measure P50, P95 for build times, but other teams might be using P90, P10. I mean, you can do whatever you want, right? So if you can try to normalize those metrics, then it's gonna make it easier to understand and make it easier to calculate. Okay, so a lot of talk about what is this, how do we calculate it. So now I want to share some examples of how the build score has been useful for us and how it has shown its value. So this is a graph of our build score. As you can see, I mean, it started very well last year, but it started then dropping down. I just wanted to highlight some of these ups and downs. For the first app, we had this effort. We migrated to M1 machines on CI. So for CI, we use AWS. And originally, we were using Intel machines. But then we decided to switch to M1s once they were available. And this was a really big win. I mean, we were able to reduce build speeds by 15%. Maybe not as impressive, but the cost part was really what was the highlight, 75% cost reduction. For us, that meant like $1.4 million a year. And I mean, I'm not sure how was the year for people here, but at Pinterest, this was a year where we were focusing a lot in cost savings. So this was a really big win. And then, I mean, throughout the year, we started going down. So something that has been happening since the start of the year is that we went through modularization. So things have been going into a bad state for that reason. Lots of CI issues, build speed regressions, things like that. But then we also had a bottom, right, in August this year. But then we had a big up the next month. And what happened there is that so I tried to find a nice graph for this, but I'm not sure if people can understand this. This is basically the concept of merge queue. So merge queue is basically a mechanism to land code safely when you have many people contributing to the same repository. So sometimes, say, person A and person B try to land something almost at the same time, but maybe their changes are not compatible, right? Perhaps person A removes library A, but then person B needs to use library A. So this kind of thing can happen. They start getting into issues because they didn't rebase before landing into the main branch. So land queue is able to solve those issues. And these were the kind of issues that we were having a lot. So we decided to add land queue, and that's how our CI success rate went from 95% to 99%. I mean, this may seem like a very small improvement, but maybe just to give some context about what this means. At Pinterest, we have approximately for iOS 250 builds per week, 250 post-commit builds. So this means that if 12 builds are bad, that 4%, and usually when this happens, right, it's because there was a single day when things were bad. It means that there were 2 hours when the builds were red, right? 2 hours when developers were not able to land into the main branch. 2 hours where anytime that you're making or trying to push new commits to your PR, it's failing not because of your code changes, but because of the system. And that's confusing, right? So those are 2 hours that approximately 10 developers are wasting in developer productivity. So it's a big deal. And that's all for my presentation. So let's go for Q&A.
All right. So does anyone want to make a question? Yeah, over there. He over there.
Hi, thanks a lot for the talk. It was super interesting. I'm obsessed with developer productivity, so I like the talk a lot. Do you have any system in place so that if you see that something is going wrong, for example, someone opens a PR and then the build time increases by 50%, to tell the person right there on the PR, stop, this is not something great for the build times? Do you have a system for that?
Yeah, we don't. I mean, and that's the dream for my team. But I guess it's a double-edged sword, right? The day we build that, my team is probably going to disappear. But yeah, I mean, there have been a lot of talks about this. I think the first step, right, is to have the data to be able to probably run many builds at the same time so that you can benchmark against those changes. We have discussed about this, but we unfortunately haven't been able to prioritize this. We have talked to other companies. We still don't really have a good idea on how it looks like for others as either. But yeah, I mean, I think it's a very good idea, and that's something that we are still thinking about how we could accomplish without making like huge investments.
Thanks.
Anyone else? Okay.
Thanks for the talk, first of all. My question is about how do you gather the local build information? Are you using some open source tools? Do everybody has to have access to internet to actually start do the building, or that is going to be pushed afterwards? How does that work? Thank you.
Right. Yeah. So I am the EM, right, for this team. I don't know every detail, but I can try to tell you what I think is right. So I know that we use something called XClog parser. I believe that tool allows you to get the metrics from the logs. But then to your question about internet, I believe that it only works when you are connected to the internet. And at Pinterest, I think, yeah, you have to pretty much be connected to the internet to work, because otherwise, for example, you are not able to open GitHub. We are on GitHub Enterprise, and there is some security around it, so you have to be connected to the VPN. So because of that, you pretty much are forced to develop with connectivity.
Anyone else? Over there.
Hello. Yeah, regarding local building times, how do you consider the developer's machine or the state of the machine? And can you use this information to, I know, ask management for better computers or better machines or better information, or just go to a score and that gets hidden under that machine number?
Okay. Let me see if I understand the question. I think the question was about how do you know what's the state of the machine, right? If they may be running other apps, perhaps, or what kind of machine they have. Do they have maybe an Intel, Mac? Okay, so I think this is a very interesting question, by the way. So thanks for asking. We know a little bit about what's happening in your machine, but not into too much detail, because we also care about privacy for our developers. So, for example, we know what kind of machine you have. So I would know if you have an Intel or if you have an M1. And because of that, every time I see Intel, I get sad, and then I have to ask IT to do the replacement. And I think to give more context into this, at Pinterest, thankfully, upper management have found the value of giving good equipment to people. So when M1 machines came out, we made a case that we have to invest on this, right? Because we made some tests. We saw that build times could improve by 50%. And yeah, we just showed that to upper management, and they decided to invest in this, and we gave M1 laptops to everybody. So we have this policy, right? Anytime we see somebody having an Intel machine, we give them an M1. So we know what they have, and yeah.
All right, so I got the last question. It says, is there any rule of thumb on what to consider when you're building the formula for the score?
Yeah, so I don't think that there is any like magic component. I think it's probably about what you know at the moment. And as I said before, right, try not to make it perfect, because I think that perfection is probably going to make it so that you never ship something. Just like you never ship a product because of perfection, you might never ship this, right, this formula. So at the time that we were looking at coming up with this formula, we just thought, okay, let's just use whatever data we have at the moment. Let's use data that we are focusing at the moment, and we can keep iterating. Of course, you also don't want to be iterating too frequently, because this is information that we are sharing with partner teams, which might not have as much context as you have. So we try to iterate every 6 months approximately, because that's also the time when at Pinterest we do planning every 6 months. So that's basically, we try to match the same time frame so that people know that changes are coming. We let them know, and then we can refresh the formula.
All right, okay. Thank you so much. Let's get a big applause for Manuel.